Yes, hello, and welcome to the Geekscape Book Club, our final entry for 2023. But don't worry, we've got something exciting in store for next month, so stay tuned to hear about that. Today, we are talking about Tom King's Vision, which at the top of all those recommended lists after WandaVision, and we will definitely be talking about it. As always, I am Christian Bladt, joined by Garrett Briones. Garrett, thank you for being here today.
You said those two magical words, Tom King, and I couldn't get into the chat faster. I'm so excited to talk about this book. I'm a huge Tom King fan, so I'm beyond excited.
And of course, Count Eric Conner. Eric, prior to this assignment in your
Mhm.
world known as homework, had you read this before?
I had not read Visions. This is a new purchase,
Yes.
and I am so glad that you gave me those two free magical words, which was no pay. And
Yes.
the price was right. So here I am.
The price is always right. Yes, and I have the copy. I unfortunately have to give back my copy because I got it at the Burbank Library.
What?
Yeah, so I had not read it before either. So Garrett, you can definitely turn your nose up at us because this is what 2015 into 2016, I think, is when it was published.
Yes.
And I was certainly aware of it at the time. I wasn't really buying a lot of ongoing comics, and then after it came out, you really just heard about how great the story was. Uh, let's have you help us paint that picture, Garrett. Were you looking forward to it when it came out, and were you a month to month purchaser, or how did this? How did you discover this story back when it was out?
So this book was one of the after the big Secret Wars event, where Marvel is relaunching a lot of their books with a lot of exciting creators. I was still not living anywhere near a comic book store around that time. I would have been 16, 17. But I do remember hearing on all the, reading on all the websites I would go to. I would live through the reviews of comic books, and I remember hearing like, there's this guy Tom King. He's writing Vision. It's really good, and I was always interested and always intrigued in it. And so I think it was probably around 2017, 2018 or so, I got the first two. I got the trades, the two individual ones that shows you.
Right.
And when I read it, I was completely floored. It was one of my first real times ever reading Tom King's books, and it is a taste of what is to come if you read his later works.
Yeah, and we definitely want to spend a little time talking about other Tom King projects, but getting to actually read this, sort of around the middle, there is a bit of a recap of Vision and Wanda's history, Vision and the Scarlet Witch, because I was all in on their 12-issue miniseries from 1985. I was very excited that they were moving out to beautiful Lodi, New Jersey, and they had the two kids, and it was definitely a very interesting thing. And then I was still there when in the pages of, I believe they changed it to Avengers West Coast instead of West Coast Avengers, so that it would be on the shelf next to Avengers. Uh, John Byrne decided, well, what if Vision turned all white and Wanda got all bad for not the first time, I guess, because she was introduced as a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. But, it was the first time in a while she'd been bad, and it's happened a few times since on the page and on the screen. So it was nice to have them kind of fill in some of those gaps for me, the gaps of almost 30 years, really. Probably, actually, it was definitely 30 years. So it helped. I mean, I certainly understood the character enough. I like that you can drop into this fairly cold. I haven't read books leading up to this. I haven't read anything after it. How did you feel, Eric, just kind of being airdropped into this the way I was?
Agreed. It was really kind of beautifully self-contained. Almost to the point it felt like it could have been like its own limited run series that sort of was in its own little kind of corner of the sky. And the fact that it did connect to other stories as you go, even if you hadn't read them. And I had read some of the Secret Wars relaunch when it came out, but definitely this was, it was pretty much cold giving this thing a read. And did not feel lost. I think they were so smart about structure and how they kind of brought us right in with them moving in, and we're playing a little bit of catch up with like their story in a way that isn't frustrating, but rather actually somewhat dramatic and fascinating. So, I think of all these sort of compendium graphic novels we've done in this show. I think this is one that actually really is like, you please read this one, if even if you've never read anything about Vision or late Mrs. Vision or Sparky. I mean, this is one that really just it stands up beautifully on its own, and it feels very complete at the end, even though there's definitely a bit of a twist right in that last panel.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the interesting thing. I mean, I understood what the story was well enough that basically, as we were talking about WandaVision for Marvel Movie Talk, which at that point was on my YouTube channel, and we were just kind of talking, and I'm like, well, I know that there's this Vision story, which is kind of the reverse of what Wanda does, and it was a fascinating idea. And I'm like, I don't want to read the Vision story at that time because I want to see how WandaVision plays out. And then I don't know. I guess life got in the way because I sure didn't read it until now. But I thought it was so well told. It's such a unique story, to just kind of watch the the entire Vision family and that cover for issue 1, which our visual audience is seeing on the big screen, and they're also seeing behind me. And of course, Craig Robinson in the chat. Every day is a school day. Appreciate consuming this stuff vicariously through you all. Well, we appreciate you being here from across the pond, Craig. And also, if you have not read this, as Eric said, I cannot recommend it more highly in terms of the other things. So I assume, Garrett, though you had it for a while, rereading it this time, was there anything that stood out to you that maybe hadn't, registered with you upon earlier readings of the story?
I think for me, and Eric had mentioned it, like something even though it was set in that post Secret Wars time, it really, and a lot of the, Sam Wilson is Captain America in the book, Jane Foster's Thor, shows you, it kind of gives you a snapshot of when it was. But really, one of the things I really did like was that it is very standalone, even though you can continue the story and certain characters do continue on after this, obviously the Vision as well as his daughter. But I think what I really liked was, as even the years since I had read it, I've become a bigger fan of Tom King, and I know a lot of the things that he puts into his work. And something at the back of volume 2, he talks a lot about how this story came from his relationship with his wife, who he met during his time in the CIA, and how if you look at a lot of his work, there is a wife character or someone that the main hero is in love with, and how their relationship is strained by whatever situation they're in, whether their relationship survives it or whether it doesn't, but this underlying sense of love. And I saw a lot of that with how Vision and Virginia's, love goes through the book, how it is kind of tumultuous, but at the end, even after all is said and done, there was some genuine love there.
I think it's absolutely accurate, and I there's some different notes in the back of the version that it seems like Eric and I read the same collection, which is all 12 issues, and then a bunch of behind the scenes stuff, and it didn't seem to offer up the same things, but yeah, you can see sort of just dealing with the relationships at the heart of it, and I think giving us so much from Virginia's perspective, I think really is what helps kind of create this tone, because she's the one who is kind of left behind to deal with things and does not deal with them particularly well, the way that you would think purely rational synthezoid would handle things. But I guess it's the idea of being a copy of a copy of a copy, really, because it's the combination of Wonder Man's brainwaves from the maniacal robotic mind of Ultron. And I thought her perspective and really getting to spend time with the kids, and Viv sort of replaying that one interaction she had with the boy from the neighborhood while he was still with us. I thought it was interesting to get the perspectives that this wasn't really, even though it's the title of the book, it wasn't really Vision's story. Obviously, he's central to it, but it's more like, here's how he deals with this other stuff that went on, and it really stems back to Virginia. From a narrative standpoint, Eric, give us your thoughts sort of on how we're really spending time with Virginia as this story unfolds.
Right. Even when we like occasionally will jump over to Vision in the middle of a battle with Avengers, it's she's on the phone with him.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, no, I understand. I'm in the middle of something here, honey." And it's one of those moments that could have been, I mean, it's funny and it could have been a cheap laugh, but it actually was strangely muted and like did not get too goofy. And I think like that sort of speaks to how a lot of this plays out. Like Virginia at times, like she feels like she's the mama bear protecting her brood. Other times she feels almost like Lady Macbeth. And that's what's so fascinating about her as a character. I mean, there's so many sides to her. And then it's tricky. I don't want to spoil where the story goes.
Well, no, I mean, I think that to a certain extent, we have to kind of talk about it in a way in terms of what happens. But yeah, there's things that we can kind of dance around. But the fact that the story is from 8 years ago, we'll do our best, but we may betray some of what happens.
Yeah.
But what was your thought, Eric?
Well, no, I apologize, and I will blame Christian if we do spoil it. I mean, we're just
no, it's definitely my fault because I should be the one to kick you off the screen before you give any spoilers.
He's Ultron to our Vision, basically.
That's fair. That's fair.
This panel here that you shared, it was one that really kind of caught my eye. It was sort of remind me if you'd. I'm not a huge fan of the film Revolutionary Road, but had a sense of that, or maybe the Ice Storm, which I'm a massive fan of. Ang Lee's.
I agree on that. I agree on the Ice Storm for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a movie I adore, and I feel like this idea of how she Virginia get to decide what she would do for a career. So the idea of her basically being this trapped, in essence, mother and housewife, and looking at that through the prism of Vision's Mind Stone, I think is what's so fascinating about this. It's like it really is a suburban tale, just through a very unique vision, if you will.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you said, Garrett. The Tom King's experience with the CIA. I mean, this is sort of the feeling you would get for someone who works in intelligence, for someone in the military. That it's like, yeah, I've got the important work to do, so you're left behind to raise the kids and deal with that. Mm-hmm. And I think the interesting thing is the location of I believe is Alexandria, Virginia. Or was it Arlington? Either way, I've been to both of them. I've gotten drunk in both places, so
That's true of most of Virginia and West Virginia, though. Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's fair. So, and I thought it was interesting, sort of in that way, because even what I referenced, the Steve Englehart, and I believe Al Milgrom did the art for the 1985 Vision and Scarlet Witch. I mean, they just lived in the suburbs of New Jersey. I mean, Avengers Mansion was easily commutable, especially when you fly. So this is like, obviously, I mean, Vision can get wherever the Avengers need him to be in no time at all, but it is kind of the idea there. It is more of a distance, it is a lot of like, I know this is important, sort of what Eric was talking about when Vision's on the phone. It's like, I know that this is important. And yes, Eric confirms it is Arlington, but I tell you, go to Arlington, Virginia, and go to Alexandria, Virginia, and you tell me the difference. I don't know that I would know it. But and what do you think that does, Garrett, in terms of the isolation? Even if, look, there are a few places in the world that feel more isolated than New Jersey, but in this sense, she's so much further away than she's physically removed from Vision's life, which I think is a terrific metaphor for, well, not for Virginia, but for us.
Well, I think it taps into those same things that like even the earliest slashers were exploring in the 70s, like the idea of that, suburbia has this beautiful shine and gloss on it. But, when people were first going out, moving from the cities, they were kind of there was this like we have to pretend like everything is great, but I'm scared someone's going to come in through my back door. We see that happen in this very book. In the first issue, someone just shows up at their
Yeah.
home. It's this idea that Vision wants to have a normal life. He thinks that suburbia is the way to escape some of the heightened nature of his life, but he's really inviting so many other things that he never thinks about, like how his children are going to be equated to being like a gun brought into a school, how people are going to look at them and always be putting everything they do under a microscope. I just think that it adds this sense of unease. As perfect as the suburbs and the nuclear family idea is, how, some people really want to go for that. It's like there is this sinister underbelly, or just this air of reality that you can't really escape the horrors of the real world just behind your locked door.
Yeah, and the focus that this story has on the neighborhood and the neighbors, I think, is fascinating, really, and it's very interesting, and it's very matter of fact. It kind of gives the omniscient narrator of a lot of things. And Eric, I know you selected this panel particularly because, as it says in the narration, later near the end of our story, one of the visions will set George and Nora's house on fire. They will die in the flames. So it's it's a lot of letting you know what's going to happen, and we know that at least by issue 2, a tragic end for really everyone except for, as it turns out, Viv and Vision, as we go through it. But Eric, talk a little bit about the specific selection of this panel and what this panel says about the role the neighborhood plays in Vision.
Once you have this moment, and this was, Christian, was this, if you recall, issue 1, or like it was pretty early in the run of
It's
this?
very early on. It's
Yeah.
issue 1 or 2. I'll see if I can
Yeah.
find it while you're talking. Yeah.
And I think once you've established that, I mean, the fact that the omniscient narrator is saying they'll die in the flames, it changes everything you were reading from then on. And this is, one of the things I teach in writing is like how you use voiceover, because voiceover can always be like, even in comic books, which uses it obviously a great deal, it can be a real crutch dramatically, over expository, on the nose, etc. But when you got really interesting narration and voice and point of view, it can do wonders to the story. So that we are reading this, and within an issue or two, we already basically know where this thing's going to go. It added so much tension to every single scene. Like everyone you meet along the way, including the dog, you're like, this might not go well for them. Oh, Sparky, who
Sparky dog.
I didn't realize how much I missed Sparky until I saw Sparky again, and we were always looking for justice for Sparky that never came in the limited series on Disney Plus. But here, at least Sparky does have a very roundabout happy ending, at least. So that at least made me feel a little better. There's a lot of sadness in this, and I don't want them taking the dog too.
Justice for Sparky was indeed a graphic that Eric sent to me in the ramp up to this. Yes. So we do want justice for Sparky, but it's interesting because, in terms of dealing with the neighbors and meeting with the principal, and we get that tone of like, if he'd known what was to come, he would have, stood his ground a little bit more and really gone up, and taken a stand against the Vision family. So we really know that this isn't going to end well. And it's not done in a way, at least for me, that's familiar with everything. It's sort of like the way that all of the human kids are just kind of looking at them. And I think, they do a good job to see that, not everybody is, spray painting socket lovers on a garage, but even kids who aren't outwardly like cruel to them are just like, what's your deal? I mean, I feel like there's a lot of things that you could kind of roll with, especially in the 21st century. But what did you think, Garrett, about the way that Vin and Viv are shown interacting at their school?
I love it, and I want to give a huge shout out to Gabriel Hernandez Walta, the artist for this for a majority of the book. There are some,
Yeah.
I believe, in the later half there is some additional art. I just love how Walta just depicts everything looks so. It just it's almost like so matter of fact, and like you can just see all these kids beautifully realize like all their different ways of just like staring down Vin and Viv as they move through school, all these different things. Like they all seem like they are all these kids from various backgrounds who are they are trying to figure out what these two beings that are moving through their school are. And Vin and Viv really are, for me, they are the beating heart of this series. They are, as much as Vision is trying to figure things out and Virginia is trying to figure out who she is in the same way that Vision had to when he learned that his memories were based on, like, his brainwaves were based on somebody else. These two aren't based on anybody. They are a byproduct of their parents. They are truly, some of the most heartbreaking stuff was when things happen and Vision is thinking back to some moments with his son, and it's just him reading Shakespeare, trying to get his dad's attention, like, Dad, look how cool this is. My absolute favorite scene in this entire series is between Viv and Vision, and it's all about them praying and these three different steps of prayer that they do. Like, first, let's pray that there is a God. And I thought that was such a beautiful way to even look at faith, and that is what it's rooted in. So for me, those two characters, how they move through the world, all their experiences, they are what makes this book really hit for me. I absolutely adore those two characters.
And there's Sparky in the background. Yes, Michael Walsh does the art for issue 7, which is the one with Wanda on the cover, and it does actually look a little different. But that's the only issue that isn't Gabriel Hernandez Walta. So there's a lot of different cover artists and alternate covers and things
Michael
like
Mundo's one of them.
Yeah, but I wanted to kind of focus on the family because it's interesting, this idea, Eric, with the kids. But Virginia has this perspective, but I don't know, from maybe issue 2, she's glitching to some extent almost immediately. A lot of like repeating words and things like that. What do you think about the extension of Vision, Eric, being this family life that he's created for himself?
Well, even as perfect a creation as he may be in some ways, like, you can't create perfection. Like, in some ways, like, right, it's an Icarus tale. And when you try to give, I think you brought this up before, right? About, you think of suburbia as like a goal, right? The white picket fence, which is to my whatever side that is, left or right. And I think that the gilded cage, right? It's not perfection. Yeah, it's not just like some in essence ghost from their past shows up, but he stabs her pretty. I mean, it's just like he threatens her, like he tears her in half, and that's just like issue 2, I think, issue 1.
I believe so. Yeah. Sparky.
And I think like that's the thing. It's like Vision had this image of what could happen, almost like a sense of peace. It's like, we can have children, we can have a life, but can you? And you brought up the Shakespeare early on, and eventually they did name check it, but I mean, that's Shylock, from Merchant of Venice, and it's one. I mean, I not to get super personal on this thing, but in recent weeks, as a Jew, I found myself feeling much more like an outsider and other than I had in a very long time. And so reading this, it actually hit me. And then all of a sudden, they're literally doing Shylock, the famous Jewish character, speech, and I was like, whoa. Like, and double checking, like, yeah, this thing was almost 20 years old, and yet somehow, to me right now, reading it, it felt strangely close to home, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought that including that, the Shakespeare stuff and just how much time that Vin was spending with it, and also a panel that Eric sent me is this moment that I think is very important to Virginia. My name, as I've already stated, is Virginia, not Mrs. Vision. So even before things really start to spiral out of control, there is this sense that I need to differentiate myself instead of my role as Mrs. Vision. And it is interesting that there is really just this one moment that there's the first moment, and everything starts to spiral out of control because of that moment. And it really made me think of at least the best seasons of Noah Hawley's FX show Fargo. The movie, to some extent, it's the same idea, but it really is just like something goes wrong and someone behaves in a way that you shouldn't behave, and then they spend so much time trying to not get caught for the first thing, and just the lengths they go to. And it's probably the most human thing about Virginia, don't you think, Garrett? That she's not like, Vision, I have to tell you that I killed a Grim Reaper. He
Yeah, I
was
just love
trying
the
to
way
murder us. So
Virginia,
I love
sometimes
the
you're making me so mad.
I just love the way you described that. Was just like something you shouldn't do. Like, that old pesky thing, murder.
yeah,
Although it
right,
wasn't
exactly.
self-defense.
It's just like, because it's like in that moment, you're
Yeah.
like, oh, probably could have been another way to de-escalate
Yeah.
this, but instead,
Just
murder.
gets the cookie sheet and just
Yeah.
goes ham with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Perfect.
and that's something I was thinking about today as I was reading. I had like 4 issues left of it. I was reading was just this idea that, and it shows, it's always the interesting thing when you're dealing with androids, synthezoids, cyborg, all the different kind of robots. It's
Yeah.
just this idea of, yes, their brains are they're programmed or they're based on other people, but Virginia chooses to, like, she does what any human being with a beating heart would do. She does everything in defense of her family. She starts to lie. And is that something that was programmed into her, the ability to lie? Or is that just show that there is a ghost in the machine, that she actively chooses to lie? She constructs these narratives. She changes the story when she needs to. And then she does develop a conscience and tries her best, but even then still kind of tweaks the truth and tries to frame narratives in a way that will help the people around her. It's just it's so fascinating. Like I was just thinking about those things today, and just how just something as simple as a lie tells you so much about, makes you just question so much of how human are these synthezoids. It's something I was thinking about today.
Well, I just watched Aliens again with my older son,
Mhm.
and Bishop has this great
Yes.
line where he's willing to be the one who's going to crawl through the tunnel,
Yeah.
and they said, "You understand?" It's like, "Well, I'm synthetic. I'm not stupid." Like he is
Right.
genuinely
Yeah.
scared of what he
Yeah.
has to do.
Yeah.
So, right, the old do androids dream of electric sheep? But here, this image, by the way, Christian, I love that you brought this up. The one with trying
Right.
to literally put something
Well,
under the carpet.
yeah,
It
Virginia
can't
is
be
is
body
trying is using the Grim Reaper's scythe to sweep him under the carpet, and
under the rug.
it's
Yeah.
it's a perfect metaphor for really when things start to go wrong. If the Grim Reaper doesn't show up, maybe maybe the kids are able to go to the prom, and who knows what happens, and maybe they have a great time there off in the suburbs, and Sparky never comes to be, though, because Sparky only comes to be because of what happened to the actual dog, and was like, all right, well, let's try and fix
Oh,
this.
hey, Christian, what
Yeah,
did actually happen to the actual dog? Was he like electrocuted by
he
the
got
toxin?
electrocuted. So yeah,
Yeah.
because I
He
guess
didn't look
the
good.
corpse of the Grim Reaper was electrified.
Hmm.
Much like Grease Lightning, it was electrifying, and unfortunately, that dog found out the hard way. Garrett, you referenced sort of, this is clearly in continuity for the time it was released,
Mhm.
because Sam Wilson is Captain America. Jane Foster is Thor, and the latter of those is something that we've covered on this show. And it's not a time period that I'm as familiar with because I just wasn't reading as much. But you do have, it's at the end of the 6th issue. There's sort of that moment when Agatha and Wanda are explaining to, the Avengers are Earth's mightiest heroes, but even they sometimes need backup. So you've got, you've got some X-Men, you've got Black Panther, you got a whole bunch of characters just sort of, very concerned for what this is. And in that way, it's very reminiscent of the series, the television series for WandaVision. It's like, if they had the budget to bring in some of these characters, but that part notwithstanding, it is the idea of like, this is a real problem. And as this was published, it was over the course of a year. So as the year goes on, you start to go like, there's really going to be a problem here, isn't it? And then, of course, Victor comes in, who I will admit is not a character I'd ever read anything with him before, but another sort of offspring, for lack of a better word, of Ultron, sort of programmed to basically kill everyone. So it was from the pages of the Runaways. So I thought that the dynamic, obviously it made sense. And again, to sort of think back to the WandaVision TV series, it was the idea of bringing in Ralph Boner, who was Quicksilver, essentially, sort of, kind of, and that idea of, this guy's there, but really he's just spying on them for the Avengers and just trying to figure out how do we make this problem go away. And that is one of the more interesting things, because they do not make it go away easily, Garrett. They realize that as immense the amount of power assembled that there is amongst everyone, and that's in issue 11, so the penultimate issue. I didn't think of Vision as quite the power force that he is in that story, but he has no trouble dispatching everyone, and I'm just going to assume that Carol Danvers isn't as super all powerful as the Carol Danvers on the MCU, because she's like barely an afterthought. There's like more Spider-Man than there is Carol Danvers. But talk a little bit about that. We'll start there, Garrett. Sort of like this idea of like, we have to stop you, and he's like, you could try, but you're not going to be able to. So you should really just accept that this is what is happening. I love the matter-of-fact way in which Vision kind of says that,
I think I may be paraphrasing. I think it, and I hope I'm attributing it to the right person. I believe it was Stan Lee who said something like, "Who wins in a fight between like Thor and Hulk? Whoever I write to win."
Right.
And for me, but it's also that these the Avengers, they're still kind of hesitant. They don't, they're trusting the word of Agatha Harkness, but it is this idea that they're fighting for this sort of nebulous future that they can't really put their head around. Vision is fighting for a personal thing. He wants to get some semblance of vengeance for his son. And for me, that trumps any, that's more powerful than any of his superpowers. It's just this idea that he is a powerhouse, and he just has that personal matter will just keep him going. And so that he just does tear through the Avengers because he is just so tracked, on one track, that he's maybe fighting harder than he ever has before, than stopping his father Ultron or any of the other things. It's just, this is the obstacle in his way. He saved the world 37 times, and he lists all the different people he's fought. Then it's not a stretch for me. It's not a stretch that, he's just, this is number 38, but he's saving his own personal world this time. And so he's kind of putting that sort of mentality towards, I got to drop my friends so I can go get this guy.
I do like how, in a very matter-of-fact way, he's like, well, I think I'm going to take this moment to remember the 37 times. And then also at sort of a later point, it was like, well, it was either the 5th time I saved the world from Ultron or possibly the 6th time. No, I think it was, so it's all, even as largely unemotional synthezoid, it's still sort of like, even I have trouble keeping track of how great I've done. But I do find that stuff to be some of the more interesting things is getting to see the actual fight, to get to see Vision's like, all right, if you want to take it on. What did you think about that, Eric? Sort of this idea where not just the Avengers, but X-Men and beyond are assembled to take down the Vision.
Well, I think even the way, to your point about like, well, who wins? Whoever I want to win, right? Well, even it's almost like the foregone conclusion element of this. Like there's no doubt in our minds that Vision's gonna take them all out. Like it was already basically foretold, and so even the fight was kind of unique because it was almost like the fight following his sense of purpose, right? And he used the same move in almost every one of them, right? Which is basically putting his arm into their chest. And that it was like his finishing move, basically, to use a wrestling term. He just like was like, well, it's gonna work. I mean, why mess with success? So it wasn't the traditional kind of fight where it was like a variety of finishing moves. Like it really was again kind of following his lead. That he was like, yeah, I am going to go and I'm going to go kill my uncle or brother. I'm sorry, and
his brother,
and he's like, yeah, help me or Joe. And even his like action lines were, it was like the Terminator. To go back to another famous android, where he's not trying to be snarky or ironic. He is, if anything, there's zero subtext in what he says. He's just straight up saying his plan and why he has to do it, and it's like math to him. It's like, he killed my son, I now have to kill him. Please don't get in the way. Although one question I was hoping one of you two fine folks could address, because towards the end it does say something about how Virginia sort of saved the world, and it or implied that, and I was having a little trouble tracking that piece of it, like because he didn't actually kill them, although it felt like he could have killed them if he put a fist in someone's heart. Usually that does the job. I mean, he punched right through Black Panther, for instance, who's hanging out on my shirt today.
Right, and I don't know. I mean, and tell me what you think, Garrett. But I felt like it was because of the simple fact that she does, I guess, for lack of a better term, the actual avenging, because she's the one who does it, so she creates the circumstances whereby, manipulating Vision's programming ever so slightly so that she's able to, basically avenge the memory of her son. But what did you think that meant, Garrett?
I just read it as her, taking the fall for, taking the blame for everything, again, lying, changing some things. That I took it as, rather than, because if the public were to find out that it was Vision who, did all these things of his own free will and volition, that change, they would take away, as she says, like, you would get put away, you either get put down or put away, and our daughter would get put down and put away. And so I took it more as their personal world, and the idea that she did, stopping him from, well, I think that's also the big thing, was since she was the one that killed Victor Mancha, it was said that when Vision killed Victor Mancha, that would set off this chain of events. And so she ended up taking that moment. She took that from him, and she changed the future that Agatha Harkness had been seeing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. No. That
by her taking the bullet, or
exactly,
more giving the bullet,
diverging. Changing, taking it so that one of the world's greatest heroes didn't, go down that path.
So he can, and then thus he can keep saving the world, as he's
exactly
been doing pretty regularly.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that it really is an incredibly thoughtful work, and invoking, Shakespearean themes and, dialogue and things. And there are, of course, images throughout that. This is sort of something we were talking about earlier, when Vision's like, no, wife, I am listening. It is just that I'm also fighting Giganto. It's just, I'm going to try that the next time my wife calls. And I'm like, look, I understand. I hear you, but I'm fighting Giganto. I don't know that I just don't have the bandwidth right now. I'm trying to save the world for a 38th time. And I just don't know if anybody appreciates that. And I think that, and look, we sort of touched on it. There is this one image that really is that walk basically through the courtyard at school. And this is the conversation that Viv replays with the boy who unfortunately, well, he I'm sure would have been better off if the Visions had never moved onto his street, you
Mhm.
know. But yeah, and I think it's interesting because of the fact that it does end in a way where Vision and Viv are still in this house, so he's still got the daughter, and I'm intrigued by what follows, but I don't know about catching up on 8 years worth of Vision stories. But what do you know about what comes next, Garrett? In terms of I can imagine that obviously you have a seminal work like this, and Marvel's like, can we do more of that? But I
Yeah.
would hope that it's more like standard operating procedure for Vision after this, and you don't try and tell another one of these stories. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, with Vision, I besides this, I really can't think of. I mean, he's been around, but I can't think of anything that like super notable that he's done since. I know Viv,
Mhm.
she went on to join the revamped version of the Champions with Amadeus Cho when he was the Hulk. Sam Alexander Nova, the time displaced young Cyclops, Miles Morales, Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel.
Sure.
She joined that team for a little bit. And it's one of those things where this book was a really big, it was a critically acclaimed, all those things, and you would think right off the back of this, Tom King would get some big Marvel hero, but then he signed that exclusive contract with that distinguished competition, and
Yeah.
got this little character. I don't think you've ever heard of him, called Batman. So he didn't continue on
Does it?
doing any Marvel work.
It
Man,
doesn't sound like something that would
Yeah,
work very well. The
yeah. I
idea
don't know
that
about
he's,
this
he's
Batman
half
guy.
man,
I don't
half
know.
bat.
Yeah.
Well, I actually wanted to give you a moment because you had sent me this, and there were
Oh,
some other things that Tom King did in this time period that you wanted
yes.
to basically shout out. So talk a little bit about that.
Yes, I love recommending books, and during this time, Tom King was also publishing The Sheriff of Babylon over at Vertigo Comics, the publishing imprint over at DC, and he was also putting out The Omega Men, which is an older DC property. And in the years since, he has described these three books that were coming out simultaneously as a thematic trilogy called the Trilogy of Best Intentions. Sheriff of Babylon is about this guy named Chris Henry. He is a police officer turned military consultant, and he's trying to figure out he's basically put in charge of this like Iraqi police recruit system. And one of his recruits turns up dead, and it's like a mystery of trying to figure out how that happened. And it's just this idea of America thinking that they should go into another country and establish power, and how that necessarily doesn't work out. And then there's the Omega Men, which follows Green Lantern Kyle Rayner as he is told, do not go and get yourself involved in this conflict. There is this sector you need to stay away from. You can save any other sector you want. Just don't do this one. There's a really big war going on. We need to stay away. So he takes off his Green Lantern ring. He goes into this sector, and it is this brutal war that is being one side has these rebels called the Omega Men. They're branded as terrorists. He gets taken captive by them and learns that maybe they aren't as bad as they're being made out to be. But you see this horrible conflict through this eyes of this hero that wants to do the right thing, and has all the best intentions going into this war zone. And you slowly see that maybe he bit off a little more than he can chew. And then obviously with Vision, he has the intentions of making a happy family, and we saw how that turned out. So I think all three of these books, The Sheriff of Babylon, The Vision, The Omega Men, they're great to read back to back because they are all at different ways telling this idea of we go into situations with the best intentions, but that's not always how the situations are going to end.
Yeah, no, I can see that that theme, of course, is very much prevalent, or as they say, prevalent, That was mostly for Eric in Vision, but I can see sort of spreading it out over these 3 books at the time. Yeah, and obviously the Omega Men as characters I'm familiar with, but not necessarily a Tom King run on them. So it all sounds very intriguing. Well, as we start to wind down, Eric, what are sort of some final thoughts on after you finish this story and able to take in all 12 issues? What are your thoughts on Vision?
I think the fact that the superhero part of it very much in there, and the sort of that idea right there, the synthetics and what it means to be a robot living in a human world. But this is such a human story in the end of it all. That moment that you talked about before, Garrett, where he took out his eye and plays the memory, and he's too busy, and you can almost hear Cats in the Cradle playing in the background. And that's something too that's interesting. Like reading this, I mean, I know Garrett and I, we look, of course, very similar in age, but I am a little bit older than him, and
but only a little,
only a little in the
few
history
months.
of man.
Few months,
yeah. on Jupiter, I think. But you basically, like, that's the biggest fear of a parent, right? Is missing something, missing out. And so to see that sort of play out in a story involving Vision, and now I don't want to call her Mrs. Vision, but Virginia.
Oh,
no, I know. I think, listen, and the reason that, by the way, I grabbed that panel because that is one of my wife's biggest pet peeves. Because first of all, who wants to be known as my wife? But secondly, like, right, just being labeled as a Mrs. Eric Conner is a curse I wish on no woman or no human. And so I think, like, in the end of it all, the things that stuck the most were these sort of human moments, but also the shock of that young kid getting killed by his own dad. And that moment, literally, I gasped out loud to the point where Mrs. Lauren, Miss Lansky Connor, it's like, Eric, are you okay? And I mean, it was so shocking, especially because we saw that kid almost get killed like an issue ago.
Yeah.
And now here it is again. And I was like, oh my God, they went there. So I think this was, Christian, I don't know how many of these books we've now read as part of this show, but this one, I think, easily my favorite. As much as I've liked a lot of the other ones, this one hit me the most.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we've I don't know, we've done probably about 15 of these. We had a little bit of a summer hiatus, so I'm actually not sure how much time we did with this, but right around 15. And we do have more to come in the new year. Seems like a great time to mention for fans of Geekscape Book Club. We will be back next month on January 19th, 2024 at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. I'll be joined by J.M.D. Matthias, who is responsible for Craven's Last Hunt. And that is a series that had a number of sequels, but also he's responsible for so much great writing, non-Craven related. But very excited to be able to talk to him. It was very easy to reach out and get in touch with him. And our other show that we do here on Geekscape, Marvel Movie Talk, will be back the week of January 8th. You should follow me at Christian DMZ for actual dates. But we'll be back with, we're going to do an episode on all 9 episodes of What If, which will be starting right around Christmas time. 1 episode a day for 9 days. And we will also be back to talk Echo, which is getting, dumped all at once on the, let's see, it's the 10th of January is when that happens. I'm going to need a little time. We're not doing it that day. We're not doing it the next day. It's probably going to be the week after. If I had to guess, I
agree. Let's go
stay up all night and then immediately hit start the second you finish.
I would do it. I just want other people to be able to be on the show with us. That's what it really means.
I think we take our medicine all at once, man. I'll bring over a bucket of Schlitz ice and we'll have at it.
What good does that do when it's just that many more weeks of not having any content? I mean, the only the only movie we're getting next year is Deadpool 3. So there's not too much. Cami Egan, lovely to see you in the chat, Cami Egan. I dig the book club. Was bummed I came late to the party. That's all right. This is a party that we can have staggered arrivals and departures. Just swing by for a little bit, grab some things off the hors d'oeuvres table. But so we'll be back in January. And obviously, I want to thank Garrett and Eric for joining me these last few Geekscape book clubs. It's always fun to have an excuse to read some of these. And of course, thank you to our fearless leaders, Jonathan London and Matt Kelly, for everything they've done to help us bring our shows over to the Geekscape network, and including a recent conversation that I had. It was put into the Geekscape feed. I talked to Jeremy Kuhn, who was one of the directors of a documentary on the Star Wars holiday special called A Great Disturbance in the Force. So you can find the video of that on Geekscape and also the audio on the Geekscape feed. And Cami Egan chimes in that she will bring the chips and PBR next time. Cami Egan, I'm going to hold you to that, because I think I'll be 2.5 episodes into Echo and be like, where's that PBR that Cami Egan told me she was going to bring? I wanted a few of those tall boys. So we want to make sure everybody enjoys whichever holidays they celebrate. Happy Hanukkah, which I understand has commenced now. You've gone through all 8 nights, right, Eric? You're checking.
I see a little bit of sun in the sky.
All right, so not quite yet.
10 minutes,
but you always want to wish everybody happy holidays, Merry Christmas. But as we just referenced, I always want to wish everybody a happy Life Day, because that's the holiday that we should all be able to support. We already put that up. Garrett, where can people find you, continue conversations like this, and find what else you're up to?
Follow me on Instagram at Not Just A Guy Prod, PROD. That's where I post about all my things I'm working on creative wise right now. My podcast, Not Just A Guy, is the main thing. The final episode of the year will be this Tuesday, talking about just the year and the struggles of being a storyteller. And starting next month, when the show returns on January 2nd. I'm going to be starting a series all about mental health as a storyteller, various different topics throughout the month. But yeah, that's where you can find me doing stuff. Not Just A Guy Prod.
Okay, yeah, you got a little pixelated or garbled when you first said it.
There is a dog barking. Yes,
that's all right. There's Sparkies everywhere, and my own personal Sparky, who of all the things that we can talk about this holiday season, the man responsible for bringing some Loki sauce into my life, which of course is not
glitching out. No,
it's actually kind of fascinating the way that this is working. There it is. Some Loki sauce from McDonald's. But apart from at the McDonald's, I'm going to dox you a little bit. Apart from the McDonald's on Olive Avenue in Burbank, where else can you be found, Eric?
Many other McDonald's as well.
We do have a few, yeah.
And if the tickets go down tonight, you could potentially see me at the Depeche Mode concert. But beyond today, you can find me at Count Eric Conner over on Instagram and X. And happy holidays, happy New Year. Pleasure sharing a screen with you two fine folks. So I hope you get everything you want for the holidays.
Yes, I hope I do too. No, and I hope everything. And,
I mean, after Loki sauce, everything is fighting for second. Let's be honest.
Honestly, like, what else do I need after I get the Loki sauce? Obviously, the Bladt cast, BLADTCAST. Now that is my personal podcast, and earlier this week, we did an episode on Silent Night, Deadly Night, where I was joined by the Dabble versus own Carlos Danger, but also a gentleman named Armando Munoz, who just published the official novelization of Silent Night, Deadly Night. And we had a fun chat about a holiday classic. Bring the kids into the room to watch Silent Night, Deadly Night. And I will be a guest on Shitty Song of the Week, talking about the worst Christmas song known to man, Christmas Shoes. I'll fight anybody that says it's just earlier. Somebody said Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer is worse. I'm like, It's no, because that's just a goofy novelty song. Christmas Shoes is trying to pull at some heartstrings. And the gang, listen to this one, nerds and geeks. The gang from Shitty Song of the Week will be on the Blackcast podcast next week. We're going to go track by track through the Star Wars Christmas album. It is not the Star Wars holiday album. It is the Star Wars Christmas album, released in 1979. So much attention is paid to the Star Wars holiday special. And I think most people don't realize what a disaster the Star Wars Christmas album was. So all of that content, you can find me, BLADTCAST, YouTube, wherever you find your audio podcasts. And I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and wherever you can find me at Christian DMZ. Happy holidays to everyone out there. And we look forward to bringing more book content, more Marvel content in 2024. And as we say here in the book club, if they keep writing them, we'll keep reading them. Happy New Year,